Hari Om, Chapter 13. We are approaching a thought where Vedanta differs from every other kind of philosophy or religion or sect or spiritual thought or streams of thought which talk of God in the world. Okay, so there are many things which are common in various religions, but there is one point at which Vedanta differs. What is that point? Most religions, if not all, we don't know about the very ancient ones, they promise heaven after death. And so there is one Jannat and there is one heaven, or where one can attain happiness, so-called happiness, if one leads a spiritual life. Vedanta says that spiritual life is to only recognize our own true nature here and now, not after death, because after death we are, in any case, we don't have the instrument, that is our body, our mind, our intellect. That's the only instrument we have right now for reaching the highest goal, and that's why we are sitting up right now using our mind, our intellect, trying to figure out something of the highest truth. That instrument is not there once the body falls. So the logic is recognize our true nature here and now. The moment we know our true nature, which is Brahma, Brahma the vast, Brahma the all-pervasive, Brahma the consciousness, Brahma the absolute reality. Of course, you may name it by any other name. I don't tire of reiterating that Brahma is not named Brahma by itself. It is just a name we have given. You can call it Jehovah or Allah or Christ, or it doesn't matter. It is that vast, all-pervasive consciousness which pervades everything and everyone. The moment we realize this, why is it so difficult for us to understand a truth which is right here with us right now? And we know that already because the grosser elements, the senses are able to recognize the gross elements around us, because the instruments we are using, that is the body, the senses, the indriya, the mind, are all gross. So the instrument is gross and what we are observing is gross, and therefore we are not able to see far below. We are not able to see beyond. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. So we are going, so Bhagwan in chapter 13, as we read so far up to verse number 13 and 14, has only proceeded to explain that, look, here is the evidence. This is who I am. I can only describe myself and your consciousness, which is the same thing. He says to Arjun, your consciousness and who I am, that Bhagwan, is the same. So what we are wearing right now is only an old pair of clothes. A pair, I don't know, an old bunch of clothes, because indriya are so many and the agents of action are so many. Vasamsi jirnani navani dehi. So this worn out cloak or body is now of course it's going to drop, but beyond that, suppose I don't consider myself this body, mind and intellect and this worn out clothing that I am wearing. Suppose my mind is able to become so subtle and so sukshma, to go beneath and say, look beyond that, who am I? That's when we begin to fathom the very depths of the mind, of the truth. First, we must understand that our mind, which we have employed in a world for very, very material, ordinary, superficial things, and it does well in the world. The mind does very well to attain our normal, everyday successes in life, in work and in professions and in business and in society, etc. The mind is capable of attaining a great deal of success, but that is not the, that uses only a fraction of our mind. Therefore, we are expected to fathom the very depths and silence of the mind, and that's where we may discover the truth. So we are going to find out today, and we may even try out meditation, because words after all are gross. Words and sound and descriptions and language, they belong to the gross world, and they are trying to grapple with a reality which is not of the gross world but of the subtlest nature. So there itself is a contradiction. So the mind is employing language and then grappling with something. It's like using a shovel and trying to clip grass, or to manicure the grass with a shovel. You know, it's as clumsy as that. But anyway, let's go on to see how Bhagwan has leads Arjun step by step through various descriptions, through various comparisons, through various allegories, gently leading his mind into that subtlest truth. And therefore we follow the path of Arjun, and we are lucky. Just hold on to Arjun's tail and say, tailcoat I mean, and say, okay, I am here too on the bandwagon, and whatever you realize, Arjun, I am here, and I am fortunate that Krishna's words are reaching us. And so here Bhagwan says in verse number 14, chapter 13, Sarvatah panipadam tat sarvatokshishiro mukham. That means I have hands and feet everywhere, and I have eyes and heads and mouth everywhere. We already said this is allegory. It's an allegory. Allegory means using an art form like shloka or poetry or painting or an image to show something which is hidden beneath it, to reveal a hidden truth. So it's hidden. Of course, it's not literal that he has hands and feet and mouths. Okay, and with ears everywhere. He exists in the world. Sarvatah Shrutimalloke Sarvama Vritya Tishthati, enveloping, embracing everything and everyone. That's where we had stopped. And having known this entity which exists everywhere, we must understand that it is like a bit like light. Now light, when it falls upon an object, we are able to see it. So in a dark room, if there is no light, we cannot fathom that whether there is a table here or a lamp. The moment light falls on it, we say, oh, there's a table here. We saw the table in the medium of light, which means that the light enveloped the shape of that object, and then we said, I can see the shape. It's a square, small Muninji table. The light just envelops it. It enables us to see something. So that consciousness is not by itself doing anything. It's only enabling us to be aware, to be conscious of ourselves and of the world. It is just that kind of light. And imagine when the object, that table, suppose the same table, moves away into another room and someone shifts it to another room, what happens to that light which fell upon it a minute ago and it illumined the shape of the table to me? What happened to that light? The light is still falling in the same place, but it is not touched or affected by the object moving away, because it did not touch it in the sense of it enveloped it, but it was not affected, it was not involved with that object. In the same way, all our lives, we are busy thinking that we are this object. Of course, the body, mind and intellect is an object. Compared to the consciousness, it's an object. Why? Because it is still gross and matter. Now, all our lives, we use this object and say that I am achieving this success or that success, I am doing this work, karta, I become the karta of all the karma. And what is the motivation for all the karma? Why? Of course, it is my desire. I desire to do this. I desire to start a business. I desire to own a car. I desire to start a family. I desire to have a charitable trust in my society, and I desire to learn the scriptures, and I desire to have a farmhouse, whatever. It's my desire motivating me to do karma. Okay, so I did the karma, I became the karta, and the motivation was kam. Kam means desire. And then who enjoys or experiences the result of that karma? Why? Of course, I think it's me. Me meaning the same body, mind, intellect which did the work. So I just become the bhokta or the experiencer of the result. The result may be good or bad. There's no such thing as good or bad. It's according to our expectations. So not up to my expectations, I call it bad, pratikul or anukul. And then these results, I become the experiencer of sukha and dukha, the joy and the success of my karma. So all that I have done is become a karta, actor, done some actions in the world, driven by karma, and become the bhokta, the experiencer or the enjoyer of the fruit of action, the phal. Is my role only a karta and a bhokta of the phal? If that is so, then what is enabling me to do it? Because my body is just a mass of matter. Well, of course it is consciousness. It is the same light which falls on the table and enables me to see the shape of it. And the table moves away, the light still remains unaffected. I, with all my energy and all enthusiasm, do all this work, this karma, the karta and the bhokta entity that I am. And when I'm gone, that consciousness is still unaffected. It means it enlivens me, it enables me, and yet it is not affected by me, naturally. Because light doesn't have, even the physical light I'm talking about, it doesn't have the property of clinging on to something which it is illumining. In the same way, consciousness is not even a physical light. It doesn't even have the properties of light, which is spectrum and frequency and direction. No such properties are held by consciousness. That means it is even more untouched. It remains untouched, and yet it is part of me. That's why I am everywhere, which is described as hands and feet everywhere. Some more descriptions. Bhagavan gives more and more descriptions so that we can go deeper into some tattva, some idea which will suddenly enrapture the mind, which will capture the imagination, and we'll say, yes, I think I can see something beyond just the material world of relationships and vastu and vyakti and paristhiti and ghatna and incidents and successes and failures, because that's all that we have experienced so far, and we think that that's all to be experienced as a human being. No, that's not so. So now number 15, Bhagavan says, Sarvendriya gunabhasam sarvendriya vivarjitam. I am shining by the functions of the senses. That means all the senses naturally, as I just mentioned, are being enlivened because the senses themselves are inert by my shining. Yet without, I am not with any sense. I am with any sense, meaning not the mental sense, with any indriya. Sarvendriya gunabhasam. See how clumsy English language is. So indriya gets translated as sense. Now, consciousness has no indriya, and yet it has the power to enliven my indriya, my senses, so that I can operate in the world. Consciousness by itself has no indriya. That's what is said here. Sarvendriya vivarjitam. I am unattached to any of your senses. Asaktam sarva bhrit chaiva. Asaktam. We know this word by now. It may have been used a dozen times during the course of the Gita. Asakta, that is detached, unattached. I am asakta, sarva bhrit. But I still support everything. Sarva bhrit chaiva. Without that support, I cannot even exist. So when I say that there is a universe, there is one sansar, how can we know that there is a sansar? There has to be a knowing, a knower. And how do we know? Through our awareness. How do we have that awareness? Through our consciousness. So if we don't have consciousness, sansar does not even exist for us. So consciousness comes first, sansar comes later, and therefore consciousness is called the substratum, the basis of all that exists after that, or on top of it, let's put it. So sarva bhrit chaiva, I am the supporter. Nirgunam guna bhoktrita cha, naturally devoid of qualities. I myself don't have any of the functions or qualities of sansar or sansari people or sansari objects. I, the consciousness, that is Bhagwan, and which is also our own true nature, our own higher nature, is that same consciousness which Bhagwan is describing. Says no, it doesn't have qualities, guna, which is tamasic, rajasic, sattvic, being divine or being cruel or being wicked or being possessive or being hypocritical or being very forgiving or selfless. All these are qualities. Consciousness does not hold any of these qualities. The light falling on the table will only show the guna of that table. The table is okay, it's brown in color and it is carved in a certain way and it has legs carved in a certain way. These are the guna of the table, not the guna of the light which is illumining it. And so he says, yes, but I am nirguna. In the second line he says, nirgunam guna bhoktritacha. I am beyond the experiencer. Now, when we say, how can this thing exist, something that illumines, okay, the light and table example may not be sufficient, but let's take another example of a dream. When we dream, where does the dream exist? On our own mind, of course. So, it is illumined by what? Illumined by our own mind. And it exists on the surface of our own mind. It means it needs a surface. That dream, okay, let's take that example. That dream needs some surface, and it's not a physical surface. It is just like an invisible screen on which the dream has to play. Who is the enabler of that dream? If I didn't have my mind, and my mind was not so active, and it didn't pick up all these random memories of the past and people and vyakti and vastu, it could not enable that dream. That's what happens in a dream, isn't it? Random memories of the past and visions and ideas, they in an irrational, illogical way, they come and mix together, and also desires, unfulfilled desires and past memories, all these jumbled together in one illogical sequence. That's a dream. But it is enabled by my mind. So I am the enabler. And yet when I wake up, am I touched by it? Am I affected deeply by it? Say, oh my God, my car crashed in that dream and I lost a friend. And then I sit down all day and weep about it. Of course not. Because although the experience was real, real in the sense, again the word real, it was an experience which I could remember, and in that dream I even groaned and moaned and felt the palpitation, which means it was an experience. Yes, it was an experience, but when I woke up it was not real. And then I said, oh thank God, I am apart from the dream, I am different from the dream, and I am not affected by it. It hasn't really happened to me. Consciousness is exactly like that. It enables everything that happens to this small little jiva, who I am, the jiva. Meri family or meri relationships or mera ye, mera wo, my possessions, my status, my honor, my respect, my appearance, all those things which we consider as mera. The consciousness says, yeah, okay, I'm helping you to experience that, all the things in the world, in the sansar, but I'm not affected by it naturally. Consciousness is exactly like that. So the whole sansar exists in consciousness only. Now, as we go on, I think it gets a little clearer even for Arjun to say, okay, this is your subtle quality, because it is so subtle that no words can reach it, no description can reach it, leave alone the ordinary language of mortals like us. And yet Bhagwan, through the very compassionate words of Vedavyas ji and his amazing poetry, which is Gita, we are sort of coming closer to an understanding of that subtle truth. So number 16. Bahirantascha bhutanam acharam charameva cha. I am within as well as outside all the beings. All the beings? How? So within and outside means what? So अभी तक तो इतना समझ में आया था कि हाँ, आप में परमात्मा है, आप में चैतन्य है, आप में कॉन्शियसनेस है. अरे लेकिन फिर बाहर क्या है? So again, the example of the light will help us. So when you look up at the sky sometime in the late evening, you see maybe a man-made satellite or an aeroplane pass by, and the sky is dark, and suddenly that plane or that satellite is lit up by the light of some other celestial body like the sun, which is distant, so or some other star. Anyway, there's light which is illumining on a dark night, illumining that passing body in the sky, like the plane. I see it passing by, and then so that I can understand that there is light in that space and around that body, because it is illumining it. And when that plane has passed, where's the light gone? It still is there. It just remains there. So in the same way, is there consciousness in me? Yes, I am aware of myself, so there must be consciousness. Is this person next to me, is he aware of himself? Yes, yes. So he must be also breathing because of consciousness. Yes, of course. What about the space between the two of us? Are bhai, consciousness is not something that can be shifted from here, from this jiva to that jiva, and in between there is nothing. It's all pervading itself, means that the entire universe, this whole sansar, this whole Maya sansar is existing in that medium. It's like fish swimming in the water. So between two fish is also water, and in the fish is also water, because you can see the fish swallowing water and exhaling through the gills and letting it out through the gills. So the water is entering the fish, and it is in the fish and also outside of the fish. That means the medium itself of that universe, the universe of the fish, is water. That medium itself is water. Our universe itself is the whole medium of consciousness, our universe. And in that medium, we are all swimming and existing. So he's saying, Bahirantascha bhutanam. I am within beings as well as outside the beings. Then, Acharam chara charamevacha. I am unmoving as well as moving. It seems like some paradoxes are used in order to explain. Sukshma, and the next one is Sukshma Tattvat Davidgeyam. That means I am subtler than the subtlest, smaller than the smallest, and Durastham Chantikecha Tatta. Farther than the farthest and nearer than the nearest. Just paradoxes. How? How can we explain these paradoxes? How can that same one single tattva have opposite qualities? First of all, these are not qualities. Even the word qualities fails to sufficiently explain what is being described here, the very tattva, the very nature of it, let's say. So how can opposite qualities of anybody? So I can't say that this person is very steady, self-controlled as well as bad-tempered. Yes, that happens to us in our personality nature. But let's see, in the case of Bhagwan or consciousness, what is that? Bahirantascha, outside as well as inside all beings. For example, if there is a radio wave, if there is a radio in my room, and then I tune it into 99.9, whatever that is, Radio Mirchi, and I can hear the music. The moment I switch off the radio, what happens to the radio waves which were captured by the radio? The radio waves are they still present? Yes, of course, they are still there. It's just that the instrument, which is the radio, is not present or is switched off for that instrument to capture or let's say tune in to the radio wave. But the radio wave is always there. In the same way, that Bhagwan, that Tattva, that consciousness is always around us, like radio waves. Do we have that finely tuned instrument of the mind? Like the radio has been technically produced to tune into radio waves at certain kilohertz or whatever. But our mind, has it been tuned in? Has it been finely chiseled? Has it developed that culture, that refinement to be able to capture that subtlety? It needs an instrument just like a radio. And if I don't have that instrument, Means my mind just cannot understand and fathom कि ये consciousness क्या है, भगवान क्या है. Is there a tattva beyond my gross body, mind and intellect जिसको मैंने स्वयं को संपूर्ण समझ के रखा है. I think this is my whole self. Is there something beyond that? My mind just cannot capture it. Okay, but does it mean it's not there? My mobile is a very bad mobile. It doesn't capture the Wi-Fi. So something is wrong with the instrument, right? Because the Wi-Fi is strong enough and it captures and it is captured in the mobile of my neighbor. So something wrong with the instrument. It is not finely tuned enough, but it is always there. Wi-Fi, if it is if it is fixed on a tower, in that vicinity, the Wi-Fi will be everywhere. Some will tune in, some will not, depending on the instrument. And it is acharam, charameva cha. It's moving as well as not moving. Because when we say that we are consciousness, yes, we seem to be able to do all these things, and we are sometimes aware of this very fine tattva, and sometimes we are unaware of it. It seems to be moving in and out of me. Seems to be. But space, simple space, can it be moved anywhere? Can space be moved from here to there? No, because it is all pervading. So I cannot shift space, any amount of space, entire space or a bit of space or a pot space or a room space. Space cannot be shifted. Think about it. Space is space. It is the entire space in which we exist. So these conundrums are used so that the mind gets shocked into thinking that, okay, there's something beyond the grosser life. I am perceived everywhere. Sukshma matvat. Why? Because of its subtlety, we can at least be aware of space, but it is even more sukshma than space. Again, no reminder needed for this, that our difficulty, there's nothing wrong with the language, with the scriptures, with the amazing depth of Sanskrit language, and the same words have existed with our forefathers for centuries, and yet we are grappling with it. The only problem is the mind, which is not equipped, which is not refined enough, which is a gross equipment. It's only the equipment. Okay, so this grand paradox, and the grandest paradox is durastham chantike cha tat. I am the furthest and I am yet the nearest. This of course is easy for us to understand. I am the nearest because it is in every kan and in every atom of our own self and of our own body, and yet it is durastham. So Shankaracharya is very fond of saying, yes, it is far away for the agyani, for the, he uses the word asanskrit mind, uncultured mind. Careful, we have to use the word carefully. It's not the common use of the word uncultured or uncouth. He uses the word agyani mind to say, for the agyani mind, yes, it is so far. That truth is so far. So Bhagwan himself, Krishna, is telling Arjun, yeah, sure, I am durastham, further than the farthest for the agyani mind. And yet, chantike chatata, so close that you are actually breathing me day in every minute. You are experiencing me every minute, and yet I am ignorant. Why ignorant? Because my mind is so cluttered, you see. Or sometimes I am so lazy even to think about it. Kaun itni mehnat kare? Let me just stick to the immediate nearest issues around me. The nearest issues are what should be cooked for dinner, whether the guests are arriving, whether I'm going to take my annual holiday next year, what am I going to study next, which is the next social gathering happening. My nearest issues are happening all the time. Of course, my car is also breaking down, and that plays on my mind more than ever. So, just an example. So, what is cluttering my mind is the immediate issues. So, who's going to bother about issues which I can't even fathom or see with my senses? And therefore, that spiritual laziness is also cluttering my mind. And therefore, he says, okay, then I am too far, durastham, for the people who don't have the ability to do this tapas. This tapas is needed. Okay, so number 17, Bhagavan goes on to say, what is my further nature? This Brahma is avibhaktam cha bhuteshu. I am undivided in every being, bhuteshu. Why undivided? Because because space cannot be cut up or divided. Okay, but am I made of space? Yes, one of the elements in my Panchatattva is space. So there is space in me too. And there's space outside too. But space is not cut up. Okay, if that is difficult to understand, let's say, are there two types of electricity in the world? What are the two types? Nobody can say. Because electricity is electricity. Are there two types of Wi-Fi? No. I have a broadband or a small band, but the Wi-Fi, there's no type in it. So therefore he says, I am undivided. Avibhaktam cha bhuteshu. In whom? In everyone, in every person of every nationality or religion, irrespective. Because I exist. I am of the nature of existence. So everything that exists, I am there. Vibhaktam iva cha sthitam. Vibhaktam iva. I look as if I am divided up. You know why? Because people say, meri consciousness, mera man, mera jivan, I am this, mera separate entity. And therefore, vibhaktam iva. I look as if I am divided. Iva cha sthitam. But I exist. Irrespective, I exist as existence in everyone. Cha sthitam. Bhuta bhartra cha tad geyam. I am the supporter of all the beings. Supporter meaning enabler. Without that enabler, my gross body made up of flesh and bones and atoms and molecules and nitrogen and oxygen is not able to have the sentiency to know myself, to be able to express the highest truth, or to even read and understand, or to have that subtlety. So the mind and intellect are subtle bodies, but they are still not the subtlest. There is something higher than that which is able to see myself and say, this is me, who am I? And who is able to ask these questions? Who is the questioner? What is my thought doing right now? Is it confused? That sentiency to know oneself is the supporter, is the substratum. Bhuta bhartra tad geyam, of all the knowledge. Grasishnu prabhavishnu cha. And of course, I am the one which devours and which creates everything. Destroyer and creator. So these concepts are not new to us, of course. Of course not, they are not new. We have been dealing with it in so many forms, in stories and poetry, and our whole culture seems to be suffused with many of these concepts. Yet, my mind doesn't grapple with it. Why? Because when I look at the ocean and the waves, I don't know that the wave is thinking itself to be separate. Ocean is the supporter of every wave, irrespective. High, low, tsunami, ripple, so it is a supporter. And in the dream, the mind is the supporter of any dream. So it is a substratum. Alright, so then, what about the supporter of my life? Who? That consciousness, of course, and that consciousness is functioning how? I am functioning because of the laws of nature, the principle of karma. And the karmic principle is what is driving me from birth to birth, and I have to just follow that law of nature. Irrespective, whatever happens to me, sukha, dukkha, grief, disaster, exaltation, great success, it doesn't matter, all the bodies, and we have been through so many million lives that in so many million lives we may have seen the greatest of success, we may have seen the greatest of adulation and the highest of respect in society, and we may have seen the grossest of grief, we may have seen the worst of disasters. How do you know? Because we've been through all of it. And we may have also been carried so many, not may have been, sorry, because we have been existing in so many bodies, we have been carried in our previous so many lives to the crematorium or to the graveyard, depending on what particular community or society we belong to at that time. I may have been buried at some point, may have been cremated at another time, or if I had been in a tribal society, may have been some other ceremonies to as my antim ceremony. Okay, so many times I've been carried to the crematorium, to the graveyard. Okay, so I'm back again. Yes, you're back again. Because we are not able to wash off our karma of papa and punya, कि मैं ये कर रहा हूँ, and we are not able to wash off this. Why are we not able to wash off papa and punya? Because it is triggered off by ego. मैं ये कर सकता हूँ, मैं वो कर सकता हूँ. The ego trigger. And what is ego actually? This ahankar is just a shadow. It's just a shadow of the aham. Aham is the I which is attached to the gross self. So that shadow itself is not real. No shadow is real, by the way. So that aham, which is a shadow, we consider it to be real, and we are motivated and propelled into action, all driven by that false shadow ego. How do you know ki ahankar is not real? It's a shadow. Because there are so many times when I have tried to hold on to my anger, कि उसने ऐसा क्यों कहा? And beyond 24 hours, I'm not even able to hold on to my anger. I'm not even able to hold on to my ahankar. How can it be real? Vedanta says the only thing that is real is that which is never reduced or diminished or dying or destroyed. It always exists, complete existence, now and forever. मेरा अहंकार तो ऐसा नहीं है. कभी कभी I feel very selfless and very compassionate and very forgiving. हाँ, तो फिर अहंकार कहाँ गया उस समय? Gone. अहंकार itself is a fluctuating little entity, pitiable shadow. And how much of our action is driven by it? Imagine. And therefore Bhagavan says, all this is on the surface. We are but bubbles in the rain. One moment we are there, another moment gone. Just like bubbles in the rain. In terms of cosmic time, yes, we are just like bubbles. Our lifespan, that is, just like a bubble. So, what is it that we need to nourish? Why are we not nourishing our soul? Why are we nourishing the body so much? Not only nourishing, but adorning the body, or all the things associated with the body also, which is my home and possessions and relationships, etc., etc. So why am I not nourishing my soul? Why only my body? And how many times? The only thing to remember is how many times this is one vision I carry in my mind. How many times I may have been taken by my loved ones, weeping and crying and sad and dejected, to the crematorium, to the funeral pyre, and I may have been laid there, and the people may have cried and they may have lamented and grieved, and after a couple of years forgotten me. Yes, of course. They have forgotten me, because 3 generations. Why 3? The grandson starts asking, ये किसकी photo है? अच्छा, इनका नाम क्या था? अच्छा, photo तो मुझे याद है, हाँ ये दादी है, because I was told this is दादी. इनका नाम क्या था? The grandson hardly ever knows कि इनका पूरा नाम ये था. Even the 2nd, 3rd, 4th generation, we are forgotten entities like bubbles in the rain. And yet we forget that. And we say कि मेरा aham सब कुछ है. So, even if we are like bubbles in the rain, aham तो उसका भी shadow है. Such a non-existent, devious little entity which seems to be driving us. And that aham is which gives rise to the 2 greatest enemies of man. That is Kama Esha, Krodha Esha, which is said in chapter 3 by Krishna. Kama, the desire, and Krodha are our 2 greatest enemies. Vairinaha. Kama Esha, Krodha Esha. Coming from what? From aham. Main ye hu. Ahankar. Now I am not talking about the commonplace, ordinary desires that we have. Let's not hang on to some guilt complex after hearing this. It is that desire which seems to grip us in its vice-like grip, and we are unable to take right decisions, and we are blinded by that desire. This kind of craving and hankering, that kind of vicious grip is called the enemy desire. Not the ordinary ones we have. कि चलो आज मिल लेते हैं, फैमिली से मिल लेते हैं, बहुत दिन हुआ नहीं मिले, so okay, these are innocuous little desires. So when Gita says kama esha krodha esha, we must understand we are talking about if something that holds us viciously and we cannot loosen the grip. ऐसे भी desires होते होंगे हमारे लाइफ में, कभी सोच के देखिए, and sometimes they have led to disaster and sometimes not, doesn't matter. Now that's why in chapter 13 Bhagavan has said, in order to fine tune that instrument, that very instrument with which we are trying to fathom the depths of the subtle truth, that instrument has to be fine tuned first, na? I cannot take a shovel and start saying, okay, I want to manicure my little garden and clip the grass. You can't do that. So humility and vinay and unpretentiousness, adambitvam and kshami and arjavam, uprightness, we need to have these qualities. These are important. So when we say, I want to know the highest truth, do we know the truth like some object outside, like we know about like another nation outside, or like some event outside, or like some person outside? Is it something? No. The knowing of that highest truth cannot be objectified as an object outside, because it is not outside. I mean, it is outside also, but not to be discovered as if we are perceiving, seeing through our gross senses and saying, aha, dikh gaya. It is not that kind of drishyam. But what kind of experience is it then? Oh, then it is that experience, that of the salt doll. The salt doll who said, I want to fathom the depth of this ocean. क्या ये महात्मा कहते रहते हैं कि ओशन में डेप्थ देखो, ओशन की डेप्थ देखो? मुझे नहीं पता. I am going to find out today. And that salt doll marches off to the ocean and dips in and says, today I'll find out. ये महात्मा कह क्या रहे हैं इतने सालों से about the ocean? And then what happens to the doll? The doll, instead of coming up again and saying, wow, I have found the truth and I know the depth of this ocean, will never emerge from it, because the salt doll merges back into the salty waters of the ocean. This merging of the consciousness with that param consciousness, the Paramatma, is the only knowledge, is the only knowing or only seeing. When we say know and see, हम लोग हमेशा, because out of old habit, we start looking for information outside. No, this merging and knowing, this knowing and seeing is like the merging back into Paramatma. That is the only real knowledge one can say. Now, number 18, what does Bhagavan say in 18? Some more description of the nature of that Param Tattva, that consciousness, which is me and you, and which exists in everyone. Jyotishamapi tad jyotihi. It is the light of all lights. Jyotishamapi jyotihi. Tamasaf paramochyate, and yet it is beyond darkness. Can't be beyond darkness. Why? Because it's like asking the sun, do you know darkness? The sun will say, what's that? Of course, the sun will be extinguished one day, but this light of consciousness can never be extinguished. So that which can never be extinguished, you are asking that person or that tattva कि आपको darkness मालूम है क्या होता है? So you know the old story, the sun that made friends with the cave, old story, and the cave said that I want to see the brightness, because I live in darkness. So the sun said, of course, you're most welcome any day. Let's call maybe Monday, I'm free. Why don't you come on Monday? And you can have a look at what is brightness, what is illumination, and what is radiance. So the cave is very happy, because these are the things it has been deprived of, any kind of illumination, radiance, light. So it goes to the sun, and that cave says, oh wow, this is radiance, I missed it all my life, thank you for the experience. And then it returns to its old nature. So it goes back into darkness, because that's its nature, right? हम अपने nature में बहुत जल्दी वापस पहुंच जाते हैं, because that is propelled by old vasana, पुरानी, बहुत पुरानी encrusted vasana. Anyway, So the cave goes back. And now he says, son, I want to return the favor. And I want you to come and see what darkness is, because you're my friend. So I also want to invite you. The son said, sure, okay, I'm free next week. Why don't I hop over? And the son, the moment on the appointed day, when the son enters the cave, what happens? Does it experience what the cave said? I will show you what darkness is. The moment the son enters the first sanctum, the first, let's say, the gufa of the chamber of the cave, it says, where is darkness? And he goes deeper into the second chamber, deeper, and he says, where is darkness? Cave, you promised me, you told me I will show you what is the nature of darkness. I want to see. And wherever the sun enters, it is only illumination. That's what consciousness is. Where consciousness exists, non-consciousness cannot exist. What is non-consciousness? Asat. What is asat? The belief that everything is material. Yes, but that is Maya, isn't it? Because that Maya, material stuff, will in any case go back to dust. It is there here for a brief moment. So that darkness was there for a brief moment, but the illumination of the sun will always be. And therefore, the sun will never know darkness. It's just not possible. It's like Bhagwan had said in one of the verses before, I am Sat as well as Asat. This is the exact meaning. I am Sat, Asat in verse number 13. Nasat tanna saduchyate. So, only opposites can exist in the material world. Now, he goes on to say in the second line, Jnanam Geyam Jnanagamyam. I am that knowledge, but I am also the only knowledge which is worth gaining, and I am the goal of knowledge. Which means that when you gain that knowledge, like the salt doll becomes the salt water. So the knowledge which the doll gained was the salt itself. So I am the Gyan, the knowledge, as well as the known. And the knowing, the known and the knower. I am the knowing also. So I am that knowledge which needs to be sought. It's a bit complex, but Krishnamurti explains it in this way, saying that knowledge and the knower, who is trying to find out that, and the known, all are in the same place. Yeah, just like the salt doll. The salt was just one. It was the knowledge of the ocean that the doll was seeking, and it became the doll. So it was the knower also, and it was the knowledge and the known. It became one. Hridi sarvasya vishtitam. Where can I find this? Where can I discover this highest truth? Of course, it says here, again we may think it's a physical place and we may be excited. Hridi, in the heart. Sarvasya. Whose heart? Everyone's heart. Sarvasya, of all. Where am I? Seated. Vishtitam. Hridi sarvasya vishtitam. Acha? Then how come I can't see it? So I am there in every piece of existence, every atom of existence. Because every atom, as I've explained before, is made up of molecules, and these molecules have these neutrons, protons and photons rotating around it at great speed and at random angles. I don't know whether angles change, but something is holding it in the same position, at the same distance from the atom. So if atom is the core, these neutrons, protons and photons are rotating around it, but at the same distance. The distance doesn't change. And so between the atom and those bodies, if you call them bodies, photons and energy, what is there? What exists between them? What is it? That space, that minuscule, microscopic, beyond microscopic. What is there? The scientists want to know the same thing. The Mahatmas, the rishis want to know the same thing. Of course, the rishis have found it. They say it is that indestructible energy. And physics also says, oh yes, we know that energy is indestructible by nature. So they've come back round through different paths to the same point. That there is this energy, indestructible, and because of that constant distance between the atom and the photons, our body appears as if it is solid. Otherwise, there's so much movement. Every millions of atoms and millions of these photons all moving at great speed, but we don't look as if we are floating in the air. Because the distance is constant. So we have the illusion. Remember, it's only an illusion. It's only an illusion that we are solid. Our body is solid. And therefore we have a certain fixed shape and fixed form. Yeah, but if you ask a metaphysicist, a scientist, he'll say, yeah, it's an illusion. Therefore, we say that this is the knowledge of Kshetragyam. That is, reality, there is an illusion and there is a reality. But the same consciousness, that same energy is another word they use, okay? Okay, because some people think that energy is like the energy of physics which has waves or particles. No, consciousness has no particles or waves or speed, nothing of the sort. So energy is also sometimes a misleading word because of its association with particle physics or empirical science, as they call it. Okay, so I am beyond darkness. Now, it is also said by Bhagwan in the 19th verse that, as he goes on to explain, iti kshetram tatha jnanam, he says, look Arjun, now this field meaning this world of matter, I have explained to you, as well as the knowledge, that is gyeyam choktam samasataha. Samasataha, very briefly I have explained to you what is this world of matter and how entire consciousness pervades this entire world of matter, and it just pervades without being affected or touched or let's say moved by any of the by the destiny of the material world. Let's say by the destiny of the material world is samasataha. Bhagavan says, look, I have explained to you briefly about this. Mad bhakta etad vigyaya. The second line, 19th verse, Bhagavan says, knowing this now, what should you do, Arjun? Nothing. Mad bhaktaha, just devote yourself to me. Me meaning this highest knowledge. Stop devoting yourself only to the material world. You need it functionally to function in the material world, but that's not the gyeyam, which means the ultimate knowledge worth gaining. Gyeyam means knowledge worth gaining. That's not it. Just devote yourself to me and you will find that you are lying in my embrace. You have entered me. And madbhavayo papadyate, settle down your being completely in me. Krishna has come round full circle to say, look, now you must be tired of all this running around in the world and all the ups and downs of the world and all the raga dvesha which affects us every moment. Understanding the main issue brings us back to square one and says, why can't you explore now? The instrument we have is the mind. But do you know that the mind is also capable of the greatest depth, of the greatest silence, of the greatest vastness and the greatest purity? So can you say that ever look at your mind, suppose you turn inward and look at your mind and say ki, okay, this is the limit of my mind. Can we say that? Think about it. कौन सी लिमिट है? कहाँ दिखाई देती है कि ये मेरे मन का लिमिट ये है भाई? There is no such thing. That means the mind actually is equally capable of grappling with the vastness because it itself has no boundaries. जैसे कि बॉडी में बाउंड्री है, बॉडी में तो है, ग्रोथ है, बट इन द माइंड इज देयर बाउंड्री? अगर बाउंड्री है तो बता दें कहाँ तक मेरा मन जा सकता है. एक्चुअली द माइंड, दे से सम राइटर्स से दैट द माइंड ऑल्सो हैज बाउंड्रीज. जो चीज़ें हमने एक्सपीरियंस की हुई है जिंदगी में वो उसी तक जा सकता है. बट intellect is subtler than the mind, and the intellect actually has no limits because it can go beyond even those things which we have ever experienced in this life or in past life and try to fathom something beyond. So let's take intellect then and say कि if that intellect is capable of so much of vastness and silence and depth, तो फिर हम उसमें उतरते क्यों नहीं है कभी? फिर ऊपर ही क्यों, why are we splashing around in the shallow waters of the beaches? उसमें क्यों नहीं उतरते हैं? That's what Bhagwan means by मद भक्तः एतद् विज्ञाय. Come on, I am the one in whom you have to enter and remain sthita. Bhagwan's open invitation. But for this, the mind must know how to, mind and intellect, I'm putting it together, grapple with the highest silences. For that, I found that words fall too short. Shlokas, Sanskrit ho, English ho, koi bhi bhasha ho, it falls a bit short. Silence, of course, is the subtlest. Music is subtler. And of course, intellect is even beyond silence. So there are realms of subtlety which we must fathom. So I have discovered a meditation video by Dr. Joe Dispenza, who is the author of The Placebo Effect, and very famous. And there are many of his videos on YouTube. Once you discover the manner in which he uses music and guided visualization, the mind and the intellect then stops. First of all, it stops. Then it stops clinging on to this and that, and then the mind just surrenders to his words and to the music and to the vastness and to the spaces that he is guiding us to. Believe it or not, many of you may have, of course, experienced it, but I do want to share it with the group. So I'm going to begin the video. It's a good 25 minutes. So we'll begin it, and you may switch it off anytime that you please, because the time is up, and then you may use it, the same video, the same link I'm going to send you, at any time when you want to dip into the depths of that mind, into the depths of the embracing arms of God that Bhagavan says, Krishna, mad bhakta etad vigyaya, come, I'm waiting, you can sink into my arms, just surrender your mind. That is the request of Krishna. So we're going to switch on that video. The thing is, since the time is up, you may be introduced to it, keep it on as long as you like, switch it off whenever you like, and then revisit that video during the week, anytime this week. That's the homework for this week. And then share whatever you felt, very briefly, not long, elaborate, very briefly you may share what you felt about this experience. And also make sure that when you are seated, that you are alone. Vivikta desha sevitam. Bhagwan lays great emphasis on solitude, and that the backbone is straight, not ramrod straight and tense, but relaxed and straight, and the body is relaxed. And then the mind, wherever the visualization takes you through his words, just follow his words. Surrender to the words of Dr. Joe Dispenza. So I'm going to switch it on in a moment. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om Shri Krishna Arpanamastu.